So we're back out on the road again. It's July 2021. Lockdown is now finally over. We haven't done many videos for obvious reasons, and this time we are up in the northeast coast. We are sort of travelling between Inverness and Wick and doing little things along that way, which is, as you probably realise, part of the NC500. Now, I did a video about 2 years ago up in Ascent when I was trying to encourage people not to just blast through these areas on the NC500 route, to try and slow down, spend more time, think of places on the NC500 not as just things to drive through, but as actually being sort of staycation locations. I like that, we rhyme to it. So I'm now, as I say, basing myself in the Dornoch area for a few days. I'll put a wee link up at the end about the accommodation we're staying, because it's a great wee place. And I'm going to try and show you the things that you can do in the on the NC500 route, or just off the NC500 route, which are still quiet, because the NC500 is making things very busy. The road is, it hasn't held us up, but it is noticeably busier, the amount of camper vans that are on the road. There's also a sad side effect we're noticing with the NC500, and that is just a bit more litter. It's not at crisis levels, but there's more litter than there shouldn't be any litter at all. I mean, I've got a real bugbear with litter, there shouldn't be any at all, but there is more. But anyway, over the next few days we are going to show you little sites round about the area on that Sitch road, mainly between sort of the Black Isle heading up towards Wick. Areas on this road where you could explore just a little bit further away from the mainstream tourist trail and discover places which are still quiet. There's lots of history in this area. There's lots of brochs, there's some great castles, there's also some really good distilleries, and I'll be going into that in a bit of detail as well. And this area is synonymous with the Highland clearances as well, so there's a lot of tragic history, and I'm going to touch on those sort of four main areas throughout this this little video blog. So hopefully you enjoy it and manage to stay to the end. This is Carn Liath Broch. Carn Liath means the grey cairn if you translate it from Gaelic. It's one of around 200 brochs in Scotland. This is one of the better ones on the mainland. And this is what Caithness, Sutherland area is really well known for. There's quite a lot, and I'll be showing you some others later on. But I say this is one of the most interesting ones. The other thing is, it's very close to the A9. That's the A9 just there. This is us here in the beginning of July 2021. Admittedly COVID-19 is going on, but we've got the place all to ourselves. Even though, as I say, the A9's just there, there's a car park just the other side of the road, very easy to get to. But I'll take you into the Broch now, because as I say, one of the better examples, it has been excavated out and nicely preserved, and we'll just go inside. So if you've watched any of my other videos, you've maybe seen the ones where I went to Glenelg Brochs, which are in a better condition. They're very close to Kyle of Lacalsh, and all these brochs have this common feature of the what they call the guard room. If I stand up I can show you from above. And they think this little room here would have been for dogs to have been kept in. So anyone who was attacking the dun, as good as a castle, would have come up here, and the dogs would have gone and attacked them as he came in. And then we come into the centre section. Now originally this could have stood as high as 30-40 feet high, and it would probably have had floor levels inside made from wooden beams or whatever. We don't really know, it's a bit confusing. What we do have here though is a big outer wall. I'll take you up, because this is all standard features of brochs. You have this cavity wall insulation, you have an inner wall and an outer wall, and then steps, which in this case still exist, which is nice because they don't always survive. They take you up. Now this would have gone up through several levels all the way to the very top of the Broch. See, somebody else on the A9 driving past, oblivious. What we have here as well is an outer wall, which they believe would have been the outer wall of the settlement. So you would have had small dwellings inside here, some goats down there, and this would have been the inner, more defensively secure aspect of the Broch. So, as I say, one of the best examples on mainland Scotland. The ones at Glenelg, which I've done a video about previously, are better established, but this has got a very nice demonstration of what a broch would be like. You can understand, next to the sea, good for fishing, good farmland, and an impressive thing. So, as I say, very easy to access from the A9, worth doing. Not many folks seem to know about it. It's just north of the village of Galsby, about 2 miles north of Galsby. There's a little car park on the left hand side of the road as you're heading north, and then you just cross and follow a path round to it. So, good one, well worth doing. Will only take you about 20 minutes of your time, so might as well do it. So this is us at a place called Austeal Block. We're south of a village called Berrydale, which is also getting featured in this video. Now, I can't really remember what I told you or how I'm going to edit this video, so excuse me if I repeat myself, but this broch is in a region of Scotland called Caithness, where it actually has the highest concentration of brochs in Scotland. And this is a really nicely preserved example. Like many brochs though, I mean, it's not anywhere near its full height. It would have stood considerably higher, but a lot of the stones from this broch were removed and used for building a village back up the hill a wee bit, a village that's called the Borg. I might stick that in the video as well, but it's not terribly interesting. It's an old abandoned Highland clearances village. So anyway, a lot of the stones were taken away, but this particular broch has had some restoration work done to it over the years by a group of archaeologists and specialists, and they've done a great job, really good job of stabilising it. So I'll bring you into the middle. We've got the typical big thick walls, and we've got the, you can't see to the back of it, it's really dark, and the sheep I think have been using it, so that's where the guard dogs would be. And then we come into the inner sanctum of the broch. Quite a small broch, the actual dimensions are not particularly big, but the walls still stand to a good height there. That's probably about 15 foot high. And an unusual feature, we've got this thing called an ombre, which is like a display cabinet, an Iron Age display cabinet. They've put a wooden head in, but who knows what they would have kept in there, the family jewels treasure. So it's a little bit like Scarabray and Orkney in that respect. And if we come over here, there's a cavity in the wall, a wee room that you can go into there. And if we come over here, this is a really interesting feature. It still has its inner wall and outer wall. There's about 4 foot recess there, and then we come this way and we've got the remains of steps. And the really interesting thing with this is that there was a skeleton found when they were excavating this originally. There was a skeleton found, I think it's from the description, somewhere in this area behind where I am. They found a human skeleton which had been, oh god, I'm going to climb over a bar here, inserted into the wall upside down. A very unusual thing which people think might have been symbolic of the fact that it was someone who was killed later on, not a ritual burial, but maybe somebody who was killed and their body was just hidden here, although it may have been some weird ritual sacrifice, who knows. Maybe they didn't get on terribly well with the plumber, had a disagreement. So there you can see it. This is Berrydale Beach, Berrydale Bay. Lovely wee spot. Up there is the A9. They've just improved the A9 up there because it was a very sharp bend in Berrydale, and it's a place that, again, we have, apart from the folk who are staying in the cottages, we've got it all to ourselves again. On the A9 it's a really sharp bend in the road. There's a lovely little cafe that we're going to go to for our lunch afterwards. But the great thing with Berrydale is this is a really good salmon river that's coming through here. And at this time of year, it's July, there's quite a lot of activity with the salmon. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of dead salmon because they've been upriver and they have spawned. And we've already counted about 20 salmon which are just floating down the river. But that's just all part of the cycle. It's not pollution, it's just the cycle of life for the salmon. They've been to sea, they've come home, they've spawned in their spawning grounds, and then they die. And as their bodies decompose, they provide food for the new salmon that are hatching. So it's been a great thing for Logan. He's really loved seeing the salmon. There's a great little bouncy bridge down here. I don't know if you can see where the car is. Lovely little bouncy bridge that you cross to get down to the beach. Beverly Beach, I mean, it's not a place that you're necessarily going to want to go swimming, and there's an awful lot of seagulls on the rock behind me, but a very pretty little spot, very easily missed. I usually come here just to go to the tea room, so it's a good lunch stop. But Berrydale Bay, Berrydale, good God Mike, Berrydale Bay, lovely little spot. And as I say, you'll know when you've come to Berrydale because the road descends very steeply, has a couple of sharp bends in it, and when you see that, start looking for the tea room called the River Bothy. And from the River Bothy you can follow the course of the old road over a bridge and you'll see lots of salmon under there. Particularly at this time of year, around about July, you'll see a bit of salmon activity. So it's another nice wee spot to look for, very easily missed. It's in our guides. If you buy a Secret Scotland guidebook for the North Coast 500, you'll find where Berrydale is. Okay, hope you enjoy. Yeah, so this is us on Berrydale River. As you're gathering from the commentary coming from Junior,
there's a baby in the
there's quite a lot of salmon here, but there's also, as I was mentioning earlier, quite a lot of dead salmon in the river. It's just the time of year. That's what I'm trying to show you at the moment. So we have seen some jumping. Sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of this.
There's one there.
Trying to pan out. This is probably not the most exciting video you've ever watched, but every so often we're getting salmon jumping here. But a lot of the salmon that we're seeing have already been upstream and they have spawned. They've done their job and they're dying, so they're a bit lethargic. But it's still quite exciting. I think this is the highlight of the trip so far for Logan. Something that you maybe don't associate with the northeast corner of Scotland is whisky, but it's actually got some of, in my opinion, the best distilleries in Scotland. You've got two of my top three. Just here you've got Clynelish, and over here behind me you can see that the older building is Brewer Distillery. Now Brewer was shut down for several years and it's just reopened, and it, in my opinion, is one of the best whiskies. Certainly the old original Brewer was one of the best whiskies you could buy, and also probably one of the most expensive. I've only tasted it on a couple of occasions, but it was wonderful. You've also got further down the road, we've got Dalmore, Glenmorangie, we've got Old Pulteney going further north to Wick, there's Balblair, which is quite close to Tain as well, where Glenmorangie is. So there's quite a choice. You could really have a good day out in this part of the country, spend a full day just doing whisky tours. And if you want to do a really top end one, I'd recommend Clynelish, because it's a very classy place, wonderful restaurant as well, really good food, a really good day out. So this is the grey cairns of Camster, which are inland from the NC500 route. You get to a village called Livester on the east coast, and it's signposted from there. So it's not a major secret, you know, it is a well signposted attraction. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, it's all locked up, so you can't go inside the cairns. And there are two. There's this larger one, and then in the distance, try and zoom in on it. There we go. The smaller cairn. So you come along this little side road off the NC500. You got about 5 mile drive on a very attractive straight as a die road that brings you here. You can't really miss the cairns because they are pretty huge on the landscape, on the skyline. And there are two chambers in this one. Although it's an enormous structure, there's only two chambers, which, if you're not a fat person, as Logan will maybe just demonstrate, they are tiny entrances. You have to be quite happy with small spaces. You can climb inside these cairns. Obviously during COVID restrictions they're not allowing folk in because it's too tight a space to allow folk to squeeze into. So there's one here, and then further down the cairn, and it's quite a length, and this is about the size of a, well, I haven't paced it all out, but about the size of a ship upturned. We have the second one, so an awful lot of stonework for two very small.
This one is taller.
Yeah, two very small entranceways.
Just this one's taller.
Where they would have buried their ancestors. But as good as anything, as interesting as anything you'll find in Orkney. I mean, this is up here, compares with Maze How and the Galley of the Dead on the Isle of Rousey. In fact, in terms of scale, it's probably considerably bigger than the Galley of the Dead on Rousey, on the Orkney Islands. But, as I say, it's only got the two small burial chambers in. The information boards are really good as well. They explain the history of the cairns, and what we do know, or what the archaeologists know from digs around about here, is that originally this landscape, which is now moorland and forestry plantations, and over in the distance some wind farms, back in those days it was much more fertile. It was a warmer climate, it was a wetter climate, much like what we're heading towards now with global warming, I suppose. And they know that there was some cultivation of the land going on here. The people were farming, weren't just hunter-gatherers, but they were doing some farming as well. So this was where they presumably buried their most important dead people. And it's an interesting example. Very fine stonework in the lower half, and then masses and masses of rocks piled up on top. Well, how many centuries it took them to build, who knows? Anyway, Campster Grey Cairns, well worth a visit. I promised I would show you some places related to the Highland clearances, and I was going to take you to Bad Bay Village. Well, I did do a bit of filming at a place called Bad Bay Village, which is on the NC500 route. Signpost is from the NC500 route, but it's just a few old crofters' houses which are only so many feet high off the ground, surrounded by bracken, and it didn't really make for very good video photography. So what I've done is I've taken you to a place called Croik Church. Place behind me, and Croik has one of the most poignant stories that relate to the Highland clearances. It's a very sad story, and it's a very interesting story as well. And I have to take you back to 1845 when the clearances were going on in this glen, Strathlyco, which is a very fertile glen. I'll pan the camera around when I take you down to the most interesting part of the church to show you it. Very fertile glen, and there was a village here called Glen Calvey, which was home to something like 90 people who were all evicted in 1845 to make way for sheep farming. And when they were evicted from their farms, I'll just pick up the camera and take you down to the church to show you this. When they were evicted from their farms, they had no place to go, so they came here and they sheltered in the churchyard here in 1845. So you've got 90 people who are in a terrible state of depression. They've been kicked out of their family homeland, which they've lived on all their lives. They're being moved on, they don't know where, and they came down here and they set up temporary shelters in the graveyard. And as you can see, it is actually a fertile glen. This is not the barren image that you have of the Highlands at all. There's plenty of trees, there's cattle grazing on good pasture land over there. So they were brought here and they sought shelter in the churchyard. Now, they didn't live inside the church, they didn't go into the church because they would be very religious people, 1845. And out of deference to the church, out of respect, they didn't set up shelter inside, they set up shelter in here. And the actual incident was recorded by a journalist from the Times, and it became quite a famous incident. But the really interesting thing about Croik Church is this window. It's going to be hard to show you this, but the people who were taking shelter in the graveyard, I don't know if any of this is visible to you, you can actually see names and stories scratched in to the glass on the outside. 1845, Irene something, various names. I really don't know if you can see any of this. I'll try and zoom in a bit more. It's very difficult to show you because the glass of the window is quite dirty. There's obviously a protective pane of glass in front of it. And there's a little bit of uncertainty as to whether, because it became such a famous incident with the Times newspaper, whether the names etched into the glass were actually done after the event or whether they actually were etched into the glass by the people who were taking shelter here. It may well be the case that they felt this was the only chance that they would have to lay down testament to their lives here, and this was their protest against the way they were being so cruelly evicted from the land. It's a very, very sad story. Church is still in use. And if it wasn't COVID-19 conditions at the moment, I would be able to take you into the church and give you a better idea of the etching from the inside of the church. But you can still, if you're visiting it in person, sorry, I'm very close to the camera there, if you're visiting in person you can actually see that thing. So very attractive place, very poignant, very sad story to think that this glen would once have supported 90 families and then that was all just wiped out in a matter of days back in 1845 to make way for sheep. So I promised you places on the NC500 route or just off the NC500 route that would be quiet, and well, Well, have a look round. Yep. No other tourists daft enough to come down here. This is Castle Craig, and it's on the Black Isle. It's not very far away from the bridge. When you're travelling north on the A9 from Inverness, that's north heading that way, you come to, first of all you cross the Murray Firth, and then you come to the Cromarty Firth, and there's a bridge up there. But just before you cross that bridge, you can take a wee road that's signposted to Cromarty, and you drive along that road. You pass through a village called Culbokie, and you carry on driving along the road until you get to a crossroads near St Martin's Cemetery. And at the crossroads you turn left, following signs to Craigton. It's a dead end road. Go down that road, you'll find a lay-by sort of parking area which you can put about 4 cars into. There'll never be 4 cars in it. And then you walk along the road a bit, you'll find a farm track that goes down between a couple of houses, and you'll see the castle straight ahead of you. Now, the castle itself is, as you can tell, very badly ruinous state, and it's not being maintained by Historic Scotland or National Trust or anyone. So it's being shored up on the inside, and it is a dangerous thing to go into. But it's an interesting castle because I've taken pictures and I'll slip them into the video if I can. It's got vaulted floors all the way in, and up in the roof, quite unusually for a castle that's not been restored or maintained, it's got the original corbelling and the original tiles on the roof. Now, history-wise, it's not the most distinguished castle. It was built by the Urquhart family in the 1500s, and it was used by them, and it was also used by the bishops of Ross. And then it was abandoned around about 1640, and there's not really much history as to why it was suddenly abandoned. I suspect, looking at the state of the castle and the ground round about, they maybe built it on ground that subsided, so they had to abandon the castle because it was just falling apart. But if I zoom in, you can maybe see this. There's some very fine detail in the stonemasonry of this castle. It's actually got some very nice features if you look round about. But, as I say, not an easy one to find. You have to do a very, it's not a big walk, but you do have to walk on an unsignposted route to get your way down to it. If you want, you can just be lazy and take a picture from the roadside. But yes, Craig Castle, or Castle Craig even. So there you have it. That's our little guide to the NC500 section going from Inverness up to Wick. I haven't by any manner of means covered all the attractions that there are to do in this area. I was trying to focus in on the tourist attractions where you're less likely to find other people visiting, the ones that are just a little bit off the mainstream tourist trail, which are still quiet. So I hope I've managed to show you that there's lots to do here. There's enough to justify spending 2 or 3 nights just in this area somewhere. We based ourselves in Dornoch and in the Black Isle. But yeah, there's lots of things that you could do if you're a whisky fan. I only skimmed over the whisky distilleries that are available, but there's easily a day's activity just doing whisky distillery tours. Lots of archaeology. We showed you 2 brochs, one that's very easy to access from the A9 at Cairnlath, and another one that involves about an hour's walk. It's easy getting downhill to it, not so easy marching back up the hill. So about an hour to get to the broch at Austeal, which is just south of Berrydale. There's other things that we did which I didn't put into the video, such as Castle Sinclair, which is a very interesting castle, very ruinous castle, but historically very significant, and it's quite impressive. But I didn't put that into the guide because it is becoming quite a mainstream tourist attraction, and I didn't feel it fitted with the sort of theme that I was trying to do here, which was the less obvious attractions on the NC500. Thing I should say about the NC500, a lot of folk are asking me now, is it getting really busy? Is it too busy? Traffic wise, it wasn't too bad. Accommodation wise, yes, it does book up very quickly, but the traffic hasn't got too dense. It is noticeably busier. There have been long trails of cars, about 20 or so long, with a camper van at the front, but the traffic has never been held up. It's never been bottlenecked, jammed, that we've experienced on this section, and this is one of the better sections in terms of roads. What I have noticed, and it's very sad, is the litter by the roadside, and I think lockdown the last 2 years has probably got worse. But whereas this was a road that you used to drive and there wasn't any litter at all, now you see plastic bottles and cans at the side of the road. It's absolutely unnecessary, and if you are coming up here, I would beg you, please keep your litter in your car, take it to a bin, dispose of it sensibly. There's just no need for it, and it is starting to spoil the experience. It's not at a crisis level as yet, but it's there, and it just shouldn't be there. It's too much to ask the local authorities to pick this up. It's dangerous fast roads, so please be sensible, don't be selfish, don't be a tosser, keep your rubbish in your car until you can get rid of it. That's one thing I really would stress with this route. Anyway, I hope the video works out okay. I try and edit these things in my head as I'm going along, and I'm thinking this one's going to be a bit disjointed. I hope you've managed to watch to the end of it. I do ramble on, and I'm doing it again at the moment, but anyway, I hope it's been enjoyable. Hope it's been inspiring you to come up here and spend time on the NC500 rather than just driving around it in 3 or 5 days. And yeah, I hope you liked it enough to subscribe. Can I also just say a big thank you to Steve and Julie at Carnsmore Wood B&B, and also to Minty at Craigiewood B&B on the Black Isle. That's where we are at the moment. Black Isle is a beautiful spot. That's another place I could do an entire video about, just the Black Isle. I love it. You could spend a week here quite happily, but it's just off the NC500 route as well. Anyway, that's all. I'm going to shut up now and say thanks for watching. That's all, folks.